We are seeing new reports in the Israeli media that the deadly and growing conflict between Israel and Hamas is actually the opening round of a larger conflict with Iran. Israel's been at odds with Iran over its nuclear program for years, as you know. And as rockets are launched into Jerusalem by Hamas, which is extraordinary, one of the same groups that would likely defend Iran from an Israeli attack, that's Hamas.
We will do what we need to do to protect the people of Israel. I mean, 1 million Israeli civilians, that's 1/7 of our population, have been on the receiving end of these rockets from Hamas-controlled Gaza for months now. Bombardment after bombardment.
And there's no country on earth that would tolerate missiles raining down on its citizens from outside its borders. So we are fully supportive of Israel's right to defend itself from missiles landing on people's homes and workplaces and potentially killing civilians. And we will continue to support Israel's right to defend itself. Now, what is also true is that we are actively
This is an overlook of the capital city of Israel, Jerusalem. It's one of the holiest cities in the world to all religions. In the top left corner is the Dome of the Rock, which is a mosque. Thousands of years ago, the Jewish people's temple was destroyed, and years later, the mosque was built on top of it. This building is one of the many sites that is fueling the conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians.
The Kotel, or the Western Wall, is the holiest place in the world for Jews. It is the outermost wall of the Old Temple. People come from all over the world to pray and place notes of hopes for the future in the creases of this wall.
This is Masada. The word Masada comes from the Hebrew Metzada, meaning fortress. It is built on top of a flat rock plateau at the western end of the Judean desert. The top of the plateau could be reached by climbing one of 3 difficult paths. This is where the Jews made their last stand against the Romans during the Jewish revolt.
This is an overlook of the city of Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the second largest city in Israel with a population of 400,000. It's considered the business capital of Israel and is compared to New York City. It is also home of the most beautiful beaches in the world.
This is Yaffo. It is considered the Muslim neighborhood of Tel Aviv. Many Jews live here as well, and they both live together in peace.
This is the Dead Sea. It is the saltiest body of water in the world. The high salt content causes people to float and no marine life to survive. Upon entering our first hotel room of the Israel trip, in Tel Aviv, we had difficulty finding our hotel room. We finally did find it, however, in the middle of the 4th floor staircase and found it was a bomb shelter. These pictures are a depiction of the stairs and gate going from one floor's bomb shelter to the next. When there is news of a bombing, the entire floor gathers into one room, climbs down into the room below through the ladder until everyone is into the basement. Needless to say, between the hard as rock beds, flooding showers, and the fact that we were staying in a bomb shelter, we were a little intimidated. Thankfully, things got better quickly from here on out.
The ultra-Orthodox have a neighborhood along the outskirts of Jerusalem that they are extremely protective of. These signs are posted just outside of the neighborhoods. Women in particular must be dressed in long-sleeve shirts and skirts that go down to their ankles. They also have signs protesting the fact that the Orthodox are forced to join the IDF along with every other Israeli. The ultra-Orthodox do, however, have 3 members elected in the parliament. Although their views are in the minority, they have strong voices. They are viewed as extremists by the Reformed and Conservative parties. This is yet another conflict within the state of Israel.
This is Sammy. She's our friend who graduated last year from Parkland High School in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Upon graduation, she immediately entered into the IDF, doing what she felt as though was her duty as a Jewish person. She currently comes home from break since she's an American assisting Israel, and is absolutely loving the feeling of completing a mitzvah or good deed in Israel.
The following pictures are of IDF or Israeli Defense Force soldiers. In Israel, it is the social norm for soldiers to walk around the streets carrying guns and wearing their uniforms. No one even hesitates over the fact that there are 17-year-olds carrying AK-47s down the street. There's not even one place in Israel where you could not find someone carrying a gun. Strangely enough, it gives Israeli people and those visiting a sense of security. This feeling and lack of reaction is the opposite of what people in America would have upon seeing the same sight. This is Michael Levin. He was born and raised near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Michael grew up in a traditional, loving Jewish household. He was active in his local youth group and attended Camp Ramah in the Poconos. At the young age of 16, Michael had decided that he wanted to move to Israel and join a frontline combat unit in the Israeli Defense Forces. He followed his dream 3 years later and immigrated to Israel, joining the elite paratroop unit number 890.
In the summer of 2006, Michael had received special permission to travel to the United States to visit his family. When he heard about the outbreak of the Second Lebanon War, he decided to end his trip and return to help his unit. He went straight to his commanders and demanded to be sent up north to defend Israel against Hezbollah. 7 days later, he was killed. Seen here is his grave at Mount Herzl Cemetery in Israel. His family was joined by thousands of Israelis who came to pay tribute to his memory.
פיצוץ. וואו, מה זה? שמע, אני מפחד, אני חוזר לפרש. וואו, וואו, וואו. וואו. החיים שלו ראיתי כזה דבר. וואו. תקשיב את זה על הבית שלנו, אני לא מצחיק. וואו. ראיתי כזה דבר.
אבא, זה בא אלינו! יואו! זה עלינו! יואו, שלום! אחי, זה בא אלינו, זה בא אלינו. זה בא אלינו. וואי, אחי, זה לא טוב. וואי, פספס.
מה זה? גול, 3, 2, 3, 4.
מה זה? אחי, נופל עלינו, יא אבא! נופל עלינו! יואו!
يا سنابل نحرر وبعدين هذه حفظناها وبعدين
احنا بدنا تقولون على اليهود احنا بدنا ندافع عن الأقصى بأرواحنا وبدمائنا ولا لا يا سنابل؟
لا تستشهد. نحن قلنا أكثر من مرة بأن أستاذية العالم تتطلب التالي: أولا أن نكون سعداء بلغتنا العربية التي سادت في يوم من الأيام هذا العالم.
طبعا.
نعم. ثانيا ولا بلاش.
فرفور.
نعم.
إني سمعتك تقول باللغة الإنجليزية
بلغوك. نعم. How are you يا سراء؟ I hope to be good time.
نعم.
مالك يا فرفور؟ انت ليش هيك بتحكي؟ مش احنا اتفقنا ان نحكي باللغة العربية الفصحى؟
لكنها هذه اللغة، نعم، هذه اللغة يا سراء لغة العالم المتقدم، لغة العالم اللي بيفهم، اللي بيخترع، بس هيك.
لا يا فرفور، انت غلطان.
Americans can be very insulated from world news. It is not reported in the United States every time a rocket hits Israel. We only hear about it when it affects the rest of the world and our safety. Millions of Israelis live in fear every day of being killed by rocket attacks. Nir was our trip security guard who is an IDF soldier. He is 23 years old and identifies himself with the secular branch of Judaism. Throughout the course of our trip, we got to spend a lot of time with him and got to understand his thoughts on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He thinks Israel has the right to exist. Moving to Israel from Morocco, he says it's his home and couldn't imagine it differently. He says no one deserves to be driven out of a land where they were born, neither Palestinian nor Israeli. However, this is the only Jewish state in the world, and trying to destroy it isn't the answer. He thinks Palestine should be recognized as a nation, and work should be done for it to have its own government. But in order to do so, they need to get rid of the terrorist organizations they are run by. Serving in the IDF, he has learned that not all Muslims are the same. Not all of them are for this type of hate, and he hopes people like that will be the ones to help build Palestine. He thinks the Gaza Strip should be given to them, but Jerusalem should stay in Israel since everyone, no matter what religion, is allowed to be there. He says that of course he is always affected by the violence and thinks about it from time to time, but altogether feels safe in Israel. He isn't a fan of Mitt Romney or Barack Obama, but does have the uttermost respect for the American military and all they do in aiding Israel.
Itai was our trip's tour guide. He's 27 years old and identifies himself with the secular branch of Judaism. When we asked him about his thoughts on the conflict, he confidently told us that he was not in favor of the two-state solution because in the mountains of the West Bank contains Israel's water pipes, and if that land was given to the Palestinians, they could at any time cut Israel off from its only water source. He does have Palestinian friends, but they have a friendly relationship that is not based around religion. Since he lives in the Negev desert, he has little protection from the bombings and has to constantly listen to the sound of target practices and fighter jets. He is thankful to the American government for still being willing to assist Israel.
David is 33 years old and is a retired IDF soldier from Yaffo. In the IDF, he was an artillery guard, but now is currently a local business owner. He considers himself a Zionist and views the conflict as something that should and could easily be prevented. Living in Yaffo, he has many Muslim friends and does not think differently of any of them. However, he is always living on the edge in fear of bombings. He does not think that it is the American government's place to be intervening with a conflict that does not involve them.
Stephanie is 27 years old and has resided in Israel for the past 8 years, therefore never serving in the IDF. She was born in France and identifies herself as an atheist, but still enjoys the cultural aspect of Judaism. She's a strong believer in world peace and hopes and believes that the fighting will soon come to an end. She's not really sure how she feels about a two-state solution, since there are good arguments for both sides. Her main concern throughout the conflict is maintaining the existence of Israel. She likes the fact that the American government is more for diplomacy than war.
Adam is a 34-year-old and identifies himself as a modern Orthodox Jew. He served in the IDF as a pilot and has fought in multiple wars. He does not have any Muslim friends and does not mind it that way. He feels as though there are already many Arab countries and therefore the Jewish people deserve one country to themselves as their homeland. He disagrees with the two-state solution and thinks Israel should stay as Israel, with the same borders it has now. He loves American involvement in the country and hopes Israel could do nothing but strengthen their ties with them.
Avi is a 19-year-old IDF soldier who guards the front gate of the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament. He views the conflict as a waste of time and has a lot of Palestinian friends. He thinks the Gaza Strip should be the only place given to the Palestinians. Because of the recent bombings, Avi feels less safe since he's not used to rockets being fired at Jerusalem. However, he feels as though with success in this generation, Israel will be safe for a long time to come. He has a lot of gratitude and support for the American government and people for standing by Israel, even when it's not politically convenient.
Ron is 16 years old and lives in Tel Aviv. He spends his summers visiting his grandparents in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and is currently in his first year of basic training on his way to becoming an IDF soldier. He hates the conflict and has many Muslim friends. He has yet to really experience discrimination due to his religion from anyone in Israel. In fact, he experiences more anti-Semitic comments in America than when he's among Muslims. He feels sorry for the Palestinian people and all they are going through, but finds it extremely hard to trust terrorist organizations. Due to his American family and ties, he strongly supports the strong relationship between Israel and America.
We are currently in the Kerem Shalom crossing where we are witnessing the effort to transfer more than 120 trucks full of foodstuffs, medical equipment and gas, as well as food for animals to the Gaza Strip. This, in a sense and in a nutshell, is the difference between Israel and Hamas. Hamas targets civilians. It fires hundreds of rockets and missiles and mortar shells into Israeli towns and cities, while the IDF makes a clear distinction between civilians and terrorists. COGAT and the Israeli Coordination and Liaison Administration for the Gaza Strip will continue to assist the humanitarian effort in Gaza and to work closely with international organizations that are assisting the people of Gaza.